Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Net That FPL pre-season. Today I'm joined by Gabriel at FPL Lens. I'm at FPL Nima. We're going to be looking at goalkeepers and defenders today with some analysis and rankings using Mariners power tables. We're also going to look at the assets based on FDR stats and values. So we've got lots of exciting stuff planned, but as usual, we're going to start with the FPL philosophy. We're going to look at a few more teams and games matchups and just look at the tactical analysis of those teams. And then we're going to take you through before we get started, I just thought I'd say, obviously, if you find the show useful, if you get any benefits, please do hit like once you finish watching it. It really helps the channel. And if you're new to the channel, do please hit subscribe. There's lots more preseason content coming with midfielders and forwards in the future weeks. So, yeah, how are you, Gabriel? I see we're both in a Japanese kind of jersey. I didn't expect you to be wearing a club jersey. Is that?
Club? No.
Oh, it's a national team. Okay.
We're both representing Japan. On the week of the assassination of the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, which was quite a shock, I think to everybody, certainly in the country, mostly without guns. But yeah, nice to be here. It's about 40 degrees here in the desert before noon, so I'll be staying inside for a while. So glad to be virtual instead of outside somewhere. So nice to see you, man.
You too, man. And for anyone asking, it is like 2-3 a.m. probably wherever Mariner is, Mr. 122nd OR, but he'll be back next week after his well-deserved break and holiday with the family. So yeah, he'll be back for the midfielders episode. But yeah, I think let's just give a couple shout outs in the live chat as well before we go into the philosophy. So good to see Blue Danube guy here first. We've got Dav Harrison, big shout out to him. He's our first super hauler. So got some exciting plans coming. I thought I should let everyone know, like we've hit 15 members now. So we have our 14 haulers and Dav, our first super hauler. I'm going to update the membership on YouTube to explain what everyone gets. But I've created a new Discord server, which is ready to go once Mariner's back. And we're going to get all the members into the server, and you can have more direct access to all three of the hosts. And we've got lots of cool features and bots in there, and just hopefully grow our close-knit community more so. Equally, I think I'm looking to maybe use some of the voice channels, and perhaps for super haulers and above, do some kind of maybe 15-minute RMT audio call in there once a month or something throughout the season. So if you've got ideas about what you'd like to see added to the kind of different membership levels, please do let us know. But yeah, we'll just
throw in a little philosophy lounge in there. You just slide in there, lie down on the couch a little bit, grab a drink, and just talk some philosophy.
That sounds good. And obviously there'll be some "What are you waiting for?" t-shirts one day. So I think anyone who's a consecutive subscriber for kind of 6 months will send you some merch from Net That Haul. But I'm gonna give a quick shout out to all the members actually before we go back to the live chat. So FPL Robbie was our first ever member. He's been consecutive for 4 months, so almost there with the t-shirt. Dread FPL, Craig P, William Podner, Kevin Rose FPL Safa, Greenback Golf, Nate Howe as well, our friend, Daddy Bot, Jack Daglish, Sean Burke, Mike Halpin is here tonight, Donny FPL, Oscar Arias, and again, Dav Harrison, big thank you, mate. So thanks to all the members. Honestly, you can't imagine how much we appreciate the support, and we've got lots of big plans of how to keep improving the content you're going to get this season with that help. So good to see you, Jaskrin, in the live chat as well. Daniel Curtis, thanks for tuning in. Evening, mate. Hi, Christopher. Nice to see Christopher Barrington here. FPL Mike Halpin again. Good to see you. Another shout out to a member. Elron Cupboard, nice to see you, mate. Donny's here as well. FPL Dallas, good to see you. Who else we have? We have Steve. Evening, good to see you, mate. He's a kind of torn between big at the back or 4 big and an enabler to fund somewhere else. So we'll definitely get into that today. Mm-hmm. And yeah, really excited to look at the content with you guys, Daniel. I think this preseason period is the most exciting when we can do lots of research, watch preseason games, see new signings, and really plan for the weeks ahead. And we'll definitely look at some of the Leicester players, I'm sure. We've got Ricardo Pereira here at 4.5 being discussed. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll get the philosophy back up on the screen so you can kind of take us away to start the show, Gabe.
Right. The philosophy this week comes to us from a Polish-American scientist and philosopher by the name of Alfred Korzybski. And he says, a map is not the territory it represents, but if correct, it has a similar structure to the territory, which accounts for its usefulness. And this reminds me, there's this idea in kind of Eastern philosophy, kind of that says the map is not the terrain. Don't confuse the terrain itself with the map. And as we get into the positions here in FPL, right, we're going to be looking at a lot of different metrics. Mariner has a ton of metrics for defenders. He has metrics for attacking defenders and so on and so forth. And we're going to have a lot of ideas, and we're going to be bouncing them off of one another. Just note that all of the things that we say on this show, it's a representation. It's our representation of reality. And you have a different view of that, and definitely like stick with your view, but understand that we can kind of, if we can agree on a common structure, if we can find a structure that's been working, and what I mean is, like, for example, Mariner's captaincy metric. Mariner's captaincy metric isn't really telling us anything about the reality of the game, but what it is telling us is that there's this structure that we, if we can identify, we can maybe make some predictions to, and that metric predicts 80% successfully. So it's pretty good, right? So judge things based on their usefulness, and know that everything is just a representation of reality, not reality itself.
Very metaphysical there, I think. That's the first thought that comes to my mind looking at the quote from Alfred. Is it Korzybski? Korzybski, okay. Yeah, no, you always try to throw me with some of these. Luckily, Mariner's not here to roll his eyes with the philosophy this week. I'm a bit more of a philosopher in training, so at least maybe you can convince me to read a book. I know you've been trying hard to convince him to read a book for like a whole season.
I keep that fight will not end, and I think the first time I see Mariner, when I give him my hand, there'll be a book in it.
Hopefully by then he'll have finished reading some of the FPL books he's been getting onto around the psychology of FPL. So we'll see how he gets on.
Not that we don't love you, Matt and Ross and everyone else, but
we just know Mariner, and like he's not going to read. Maybe an Audible you'll listen to. Quick shout out to Steve Sedman as well, who's tuned in, and I can't believe it. It's happened again. He's back here to talk about Cody. Fancy Pavilion. As usual, you can see the hat is always very close to me. If anyone in the live chat doesn't recognize, see, that looks very familiar, doesn't it? Thank you, Jared. I'll let you get on to the matchups then. So today we're going to obviously cover Leicester, West Ham, and United. So perhaps these are teams that people are a bit more interested in. I know we've been working our way back from the table, and as we get closer to the start of the season, we're going to get to the bigger teams. No offense to United being lumped in there with Leicester and West Ham. Sorry, guys.
I know. So when I told Nima about like the groups in which I was going to cover the matchups, and I just know that you were really happy I didn't place Arsenal in this group, and that I went with a group of 3 and didn't go with the group of 4. I knew you were super relieved and appreciative of that. So yeah, this is a bit of a topsy-turvy group, I think, with Leicester, West Ham, and United, and there are just a lot of questions with these teams, and a lot of potential as well. Although somebody told me once that potential is just kind of like expectations waiting to be unfulfilled. Like potential doesn't actually exist, but we assign potential to people. But anyway, that's a separate point. I want to start with Leicester, and then the first thing you'll notice here in the matchups graphic is that there's no image, and that's not because I had time. I worked on this for quite a while. I had time, but I don't know what to look for with Leicester. Leicester, they're a team with 5 attackers, right? Vardy, Daka, Nacho, Barnes, Madison. Each one good in his own right, minus Barnes, of course. Not Harvey Barnes. But they play 2 similar positions. There's no formation really that can incorporate all 4 of them. All 5 of them. I already forgot about Barnes. So for that reason, I find them confusing. To get to the stats from the unexpected stats point of view, they are plus 8.72 expected goals, delta non-penalty. So that's the goals non-penalty minus expected goals non-penalty, and so they exceed like everybody by far. Chelsea's second most with plus 2.94. So this is like them exceeding their non-penalty XG shows that kind of like any one of these players is good at finishing at any moment. Still, the question is like how do you operate them? What's interesting is that their expected goals on target delta was only 8th best. So they're good at exceeding the opportunities created for them, but less good at taking the shots, even though the shots are much better than average. So I think that shows that belies maybe some inconsistency. There could be some inconsistency with the attack in terms of the finishing. And it could be a case of I could see maybe a hot hand scenario here or a hot foot scenario. With the player that's in form will get the minutes, and we oftentimes won't know that because that form will come out in practice. From a creativity perspective, Leicester obviously not good defensively. They conceded more big chances than Watford and Everton. They conceded 88 big chances last season. And they're one of 4 teams, along with Watford, Burnley, and Norwich, that concede over 150 chances from the left. Now, we have to take into account that Leicester's backline was ravaged with injury last season. So I'll be paying close attention to their defense, especially in preseason, to see if they're showing some kind of what I'll be looking for is chemistry from the back four there. From a shots perspective, let's see. One of 3 teams, along with Burnley and Norwich, we're seeing a pattern here. They're good. Leicester is defensively, they compare with Burnley and Norwich. One of only 3 teams to concede more than 390 shots in the box. That's more than 10 shots in the box per match. That's not very good, right? So and I don't think that's just a question of the defense. I think there's some midfield responsibilities or even some tactical kind of holes from Brendan Rodgers. We've seen Brendan Rodgers in the past from a tactical perspective, just get in over his head. What comes to mind is I remember that season where everybody blames Gerrard for slipping in that loss to Chelsea, and they say that's why they lost the title. When really it was the next game or 2 games later against Palace when they blew a 3-1 lead. And Brendan Rodgers just kept pushing everybody forward for some reason. Palace came back and took 2 points from them. That's where they really lost the league for me, and I think that's all on Brendan Rodgers. So I don't really trust him. But Leicester do have, like I mentioned, potential, right? So their assets are always going to be kind of on the radar, on the watch list. That says shots there, should say goalkeeper. This was interesting, I thought. So Schmeichel in game weeks 1 through 19, the first half of the season, he faced an XG on target conceded. So this was kind of basically think of the quality of the shots against him that he's receiving of 25.5, and he conceded 33 goals. So that's a negative 7.5 XGP, expected goals prevented, which was last in the league, worse than Krul. In the second half of the season, game weeks 20 through 38, he faced more difficult shots, 0.3 expected goals on target conceded, so more difficult shots than before, but conceded only 25 goals. So it almost flipped, and he went to a plus 0.3 goals prevented, which was best in the league in the second half of the season. So what Schmeichel are we going to get, and what went wrong with Schmeichel would take like some deeper analysis there. But that's something to watch as well. And was Schmeichel largely responsible for Leicester defensive frailties, despite all the chances that they conceded? I think these are some things to watch for in preseason. That's what I got for Leicester.
Yeah, I think it's just worth pointing out, as you say, that the defensive frailties. It did coincide with a lot of kind of injuries and unhealthy players in the back line. And I do wonder if this season, with no kind of European focus, there's probably going to be a time when they're beneficial. Like there'll be a spell of games where we might want these defenders, for instance, in the fixture block. Mm-hmm. But for me personally, like although there is some value in the wing backs at 4.5, I just think there's better options, which we'll come on to later, that I can't see myself starting the season with one of the 4.5 wing backs from there. On the attacker side, I think Vardy's that weird price point where he's kind of like, there's no players within like 1.5 million of him in his position. So he's on like a price island. And it kind of means that if you don't have him, you can't get to him. And if you have him, you can't get to the next level above. Yes, you could downgrade, but like there's no one at his price point apart from him. And for me, when I start the season, I think we talked a lot about in the previous episode, I want like flexibility in my structure. Right. So where you got someone like a Gabriel or Jesus, where something, I think there's like potentially 15 players almost within 1 million of him that you can get to without having to leave any money in the bank. That just feels like a much more flexible start. But we know Vardy has been consistently starting off hot, hasn't he, a lot of seasons, and we always kind of don't go with him, and then he's at the awkward price point we can't get to him in one move, and by the time we maybe do get to him, that kind of fire has gone out. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a few Maverick managers start with a Vardy. But personally, if I was going to go for one of the attackers, I really liked what I saw from Maddison the last few seasons. And I just think at 8 million, with that whole kind of idea of players and kind of price points where you can move easily, I could see myself not starting with a Maddison. But if he shows good form early on, I could very quickly jump to him if one of my other 8 millions ends up not doing so well, or if someone like a Diaz gets injured or Saka doesn't play as often as we think. There's a lot we don't know yet, right? All the research before game week 1 kind of gets thrown out the window once the first matches happen, because suddenly the truth comes out and we see what teams are really doing and how they really appear. I think 2 years ago, Liverpool won the league and they lost like all their preseason games. So yeah, like you can't put too much emphasis on preseason apart from building fitness, I don't think. But yeah, so all the research is great now, but what we know now is going to change very quickly within a week. And I wouldn't mind moving to someone like a Maddison or a 4.5 Leicester defender without the European focus, I guess, is my concluding thought.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think what holds us off is, even more so than the price point, is as for Vardy at least, is the replacement options. I think there are more affordable replacement options, certain with better fixtures, like Gabriel Jesus is a perfect example. And so they start Brentford and then Arsenal away, which isn't going to be easy. Then Southampton home. The Brentford and Southampton home are prime fixtures, right? And then they go Chelsea away. So it's Arsenal away, Chelsea away. That could be difficult. Then they have Brighton away, which could be another difficult one from a defensive perspective. But when we're looking at like game week 9, for example, we could be we could be seeing certainly emerging assets. We'll get to the defenders later. But Maddison could be the hot 8.0, if you're rotating 8.0 midfielders, right, or 8.0 assets in general. You could go like from a Saka to a Maddison in a game week, in a wild card after game week 8, for example, in that international break. So their fixtures line up really nicely for that wild card, and I do expect a lot of people to be bringing in Leicester players after on their first wild card.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just to shout out as well, Total Tactics FPL, another great YouTube channel, and I met Fran a few times, and he's a great guy. Good to see FPL Casuals, FPL Penguin tuning in as well. Nice. He's going with Haaland, Jesus, and Watkins, but we'll look at that. We got a Vardy owner here, a regular hauler Combe, so I'd be interested to see if he's still in your team at the start of the season, and good to see Christopher Barrington as well. But we'll come back to these. I think he's talking about Nathan Collins that recently signed to Wolves, and whether that makes the Wolves wing backs more appealing. But I guess we'll get to the defenders after the matchups. Let's move on from Leicester. I just thought they were worth discussing because of the lack of European fixtures as well. Just to add that caveat, and the idea that they could be people we pile in on in the first wildcard, for instance. I just think the early fixtures, they're very hot and cold, and one good, one bad, one good, one bad. It's not quite appealing enough for me to go with them at the beginning anyway. But yeah, why don't we go to West Ham then? Because this is another team that they played incredibly last year. They got very far in the Europa League, and they look to be strengthening. If they do sign Danjuma as well, that's another big move from them. And if they keep kind of Rice and Bowen, they do. I think we're going to get to a point where you could kind of say West Ham need to be in that discussion as one of the top teams in the league. I hate to admit it, but I definitely think they're in that kind of top 8 or top 6 conversation if they keep strengthening and not lose their key assets.
Yeah, I mean, West Ham are interesting as well because we saw them start really well. We certainly had several of their assets to begin the season last season, and that worked well for us. But and there's also a perception that they did well towards the end of the season as well through these tough fixtures, and they did. But statistically, I thought it was interesting from an expected stats point of view. they had the highest expected goals on target delta. So that's if you take the goals and you subtract the expected goals on target, so the quality of the shot, theirs is at plus 7.43, which means that goalkeepers allowed kind of plus 7.43 more goals than they should have based on the quality of the shot. And I wonder if that kind of stat is really sustainable, where we saw like Bowen had 2.7 of that and Ben Rahma had 0.28 of that. It could be argued that scoring more expected goals on target, so scoring more than the shot quality you take, there's some luck involved in that, or face bad goalkeepers. I'm not really sure on that front. So doing a little digging to get to the creativity in, again, I'm noticing this kind of like split between the first half of the season and the second half. So in game weeks 1 through 19, they were 7th, 10th, and 4th for chances created from the left, center, and the right, respectively. In game weeks 20 through 38, so in the second half of the season, they were 10th, 19th, and 20th for chances created from the left, center, and right. So it dropped from 7th to 10th on the left, from 10th to 19th in the center, and from 4th to 20th from to last on the right-hand side. And that's kind of where Bowen plays, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. The graphic there, the image from Fantasy Football Scout, of course, they have some great heat maps, and this is the chances created heat map, first half of the season, second half of the season. You can see how the first half of the season on the left-hand side there, it's just so much, it's just lit up much more on all sides. So I find that really interesting and a little bit concerning about West Ham. Did they overperform given their chances created and their potential luck in finishing? I think they may have. And the one thing that's interesting is almost from a shots perspective, almost 1 of every 5 shots in the box was a shot in the 6-yard box for West Ham. So that's a 19%, and it was, yeah, the best by a couple of percentage in the division. So I thought that was really interesting. The tactical focus here, they signed a center back. I don't know if they're just strengthening, if they're going to be shifting from a 3-5-2 to a 4-2-3-1. I'm assuming the 4-2-3-1 should be their preferred formation. And yeah, I don't know what to make of West Ham because of the kind of first half, second half disparity.
No, this is really interesting. I think we look at kind of players like Son who regularly have lower XG than they score. And I guess in the same context, the question is, do we consider the West Ham players as world class as we consider Heung-min Son? He's someone who maybe we're more willing to say can continue scoring because over 5-6 years in the Prem, he's every year over. Yeah.
Let me get to the difference in that. So like Son is a player that will outperform his XG, right? So the XG, the chance that's created, right, when he's about to take the shot, he outperforms that chance. But this is like outperforming the shot. So imagine like after he takes a shot, say the shot has a post-shot XG, right? An expected goals on target of 0.5, right? And the keeper lets it in. That would be plus 0.5. Like if it's 0.5, maybe the keeper should save it. Maybe it's a coin flip. I think it depends on other things as well. But can you outperform your own shooting? Is that
so? It's almost his fortune, I guess you're saying. So, right. Whereas Son is like being more clinical than the chance that he's shooting, because XG is a pre-shot metric, right? Right. You're looking at based on the post-shot numbers, the teams they were facing, maybe the goalkeepers or defenders who should have been blocking or whatever, they were just kind of running around like headless chickens potentially. Yeah, I do wonder if maybe they were just panicking at the pace of Bowen bombing down the wing on a counter-attack. Maybe kind of shat themselves maybe. But at what point do they kind of improve? Because, yeah, you're right. Even if these guys do really well, surely the opponents can't consistently underperform the saving to this level again. It relies on a lot more things to go wrong. Whereas with one player being clinical, that's in their own hands, right?
Right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I thought I'd bring that up because for me, it felt like it was kind of in a similar train of thought, but I'm glad to get your opinion on it, on the differences between the two metrics. I really like this idea that they're shooting 1 in every 5 shots in the box from the 6. I didn't realize that they're number 1 in the division for that. That's pretty interesting as well. So I guess it's interesting for me because someone like Antonio, obviously he was in hot form at the beginning and he kind of disappeared for a long time. He had like 1 goal in 10 or maybe less. And so it's almost like despite the centre forward not being the one on the end of these, they were still taking shots from the 6. So was it the wingers running in? Like, what was happening? Were they late runners? Yeah.
My guess, and I haven't looked into it in more investigation here, but my guess is that it's from Cresswell corner kicks and the likes of Socek and Dawson and these guys in that 6. Maybe those shots could be headers.
Like set piece headers and Suchek late runs. Like we see him do it for his national team as well all the time, right? It's his play style. Like he loves a goal. Okay, no, that's interesting. And I guess the other side of this is we've got to still see who they sign. So I know you're updating these matchups as we get closer to the season. So maybe we'll have a different opinion. But for now, again, I think someone asked me how come I'm not looking at West Ham players in my Game Week 1 team. I think the biggest omission is not many people are talking about Pablo Fornals. And he's someone who really looked like he'd broken into the team and he was getting consistent minutes towards the end of last season. And he's a 5.5 mil mid, right? Compared to the likes of Neto, Wissa, Elise, these guys. So he's another one for that kind of enabler midfield position. And I know when we looked at the fixtures last week, for anyone who didn't see the episode about fixture blocks and swings, West Ham have an incredible fixture block from kind of game week 7 to 10. Now, they do have some other okay fixtures a bit earlier on, but most of them are kind of like red in Mariners FDR. And we'll show them FDR after these matchups for you to see for yourselves. But I think that's what kind of puts me off. But at Fornals, it could be very exciting. And I do wonder if like the likes of Neto and Wissa completely belly flop, will we all be kind of moving to Fornals? And is there an argument to maybe just start the season with him? Because he's a great player from what I've seen so far. And he's only going to get better. And this team like have a stable system. Like they're clearly doing very well. And I've been impressed with them, as I said. Like I think they're in the discussions as like a top 8 Premier League team now. And like I feel like they've proven themselves after the European pedigree last season.
Yeah, I mean, for an enabler like that, I mean, I'm assuming you would need him to play early on, right?
That's the thing. He'd be like the 3rd or 4th mid that I'm playing every week. Like he wouldn't be getting benched or anything. Yeah,
exactly. So to go through those difficult fixtures that we were talking about, that we'll get to Mariners metric soon here, with that kind of risky punt. I guess it's not risky because he's cheap, right? But it's risky in terms of opportunity. Like if you're missing out on a Wissa that might have, at least some checkered fixtures and not just a solid block. I mean, I think obviously City's a bad fixture. I don't think Brighton's a good fixture. I don't think Villa's necessarily a good fixture. Then you have Spurs and Chelsea before getting to the run of Newcastle, Everton, Wolves, right? So you're probably not looking at them until game week 7, except for game week 2, and then game week 7 again. So I think Fornals and I think Tom from WGTA spoke about him a little bit with Lucy on their show. I think he's definitely one for the watch list, and I think he could be the enabler starting game week 7. But I think to start the season, I would probably go in a different direction. Even I think Jacob Ramsey's a good enabler, but we're not. We've already spoken about Villa.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good shout because I'm more of a fixtures player anyway. So to kind of just go for him to save the transfer down the line when I might even be wildcarding by then, it just seems like I'll be missing out on the opportunity of getting an enabler that does have the better fixtures that I'm comfortable starting in every week. Cool, let's get to the next team. But just before we do, just a quick shout out to One Life Soccer TV as well. I think I see him on Twitter. He's a really great guy. I think he's a coach as well, Gabriel. So I've always seen he's got like a great tactical mind. So nice to see him tuning in and high FPL A+. Let's keep going. So I think the last one was Man United in here with the rest of the mid-table teams before we go to big clubs next week.
Yes, so I'm sure everyone is keen to hear about Man United, and I wish I could kind of like satisfy. I don't think you're gonna be very satisfied with what I have to say, because I think Man United is still a bunch of question marks right now. I will just to start off, I will turn you to Gian Batra on Twitter. I don't remember what his handle is. Maybe you can look him up while I.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat. I'll find it.
Yeah, throw it in the chat because he wrote a great thread on United, and we've had some interesting discussions around it. And I'll get to those discussions and what it means. It was a tactical discussion shortly, but let me start with the stats here. From the expected stats, they're, from an attacking point of view, you have Liverpool and Man City in tier 1, and then there's usually a tier 2 of about like anywhere from 3 to 5 teams, something like that. So that's just kind of like how all the stats work, almost like across the board, the attacking stats. So you kind of have to get used to that and see them in terms of tiers. So the United are in a second tier of teams with Chelsea, Tottenham, and Arsenal, with a non-penalty XG between 58 and 65. So it's pretty decent. Even everyone sees United. We have this perception of United that they are inept and they're like football blue balls or something. But from a non-penalty XG perspective, they're right in the mix with those other teams that did pretty well last season. The downside for United, of course, is that they're only mid-table for expected goals conceded non-penalty. It's 57.35 over the season. And they conceded 57 goals, so it's right on with their expected goals numbers. But that's worse than teams like West Ham, Brentford, and Villa. So I think United, Erik ten Hag needs to kind of solidify that. We all know that the defensive mid position needs some work, that they need reinforcements there. But not just there. They brought in Malacia. They signed him as a left back. He's a left-footed left back that gets inside, makes kind of inverted runs, and I'll get to that tactical element in just a moment. From a creativity perspective, they had the third most chances created from the left, which was interesting, and adding Malacia is I think going to increase their reliance on chance creation from that left side. So I'd be looking to whoever plays on the left for United, including Malacia at some point once they get if they get their defense sorted. Let's see, and they conceded a similar number of chances per 90 from the left, right, and the center. I always thought for some reason that United conceded more from their left, and then when I looked at it, they concede 3.18 from the left per 90, 3.08 in the center, and then 3.39 from the right. So a little bit more on the right, but I think it's pretty negligible. Shots perspective, they have the second lowest ratio of shots in the 6. So it's like the opposite of what we said with West Ham, where 19% of their shots of the shots in the box were in the 6. Only 9.5% of United's shots in the box were shots in the 6. And when I'm working with these numbers, it's not like West Ham have fewer shots in the box in general. West Ham they both have over 300 shots in the box. So that was kind of like the number, the baseline I was using there. So that's not good from United. So like tactically, I wrote here, they'll probably stay with the 4-2-3-1 until Erik ten Hag can figure out what they're doing kind of defensively, but also figure out how to teach United to have sustained possession and fluidity of movement. I think those two elements will give United the safety net for when they lose possession, it won't be in super dangerous areas, and when they lose possession, they'll be positioned well enough to recover from that loss of possession. Now, this is from Gian on Twitter. He says United will play with wide wingers and try to have the wing backs make underlapping runs. I thought this really interesting because Malacia is a left-footed left back that's supposed to be making underlapping runs. So they're carrying the ball probably on the outside and underlapping while the winger is supposed to stay wide. This is going to isolate the two wingers. So if it's Rashford and Sancho, it's going to isolate them a little bit more. They'll be a little wider than we want. But I want to see if he puts Sancho on the left and Rashford on the right. Here I'm showing, because the way things are right now, I think Rashford likes to run into space, and it looks like Malacia also likes to run into space. And I don't think that they have complementary skill sets. Sancho likes to play combination plays, so Sancho can get close to Malacia. Malacia coming from Ajax, this is the system he grew up with as well. I think they can combine well on the left. I would play Sancho on the left, I think, in theory, and try Rashford or have Rashford compete with Elanga or something on the right-hand side. But we'll see what Erik ten Hag does.
Yeah, I think it is interesting. There was a lot of talk yesterday after the was it yesterday, Liverpool Man United friendly, where Man United won their pre-season cup. I'm sure they were very happy to celebrate that. But Malacia, from what I've seen, like he is an exciting talent for the future. I do wonder if he will act as more of a backup to Luke Shaw to start with and start like Europa games. However, we do know Luke Shaw is prone to breaking down. So there's no doubt that he could very much get himself into that kind of team and make that spot his own earlier than maybe many expect. But I'm not convinced he'd like be the guy who starts in the first game in that position. But we'll see, I suppose.
It should be a straight up competition for that spot. I mean, one thing Luke Shaw does, and this is a problem Solskjaer had, and what's his name, Rangnick also had, is that when Luke Shaw plays, you have to shift Maguire over so far to the left to cover for him that then the other center back, whoever it is, Varane or whoever it was before, has to shift as well, and that isolates the right back. So it destabilizes the entire back line when Shaw plays, because Shaw can't get back quickly enough. I don't think Shaw has the fitness to play Ten Hag's system, and Ten Hag is well familiar with Malacia. I think Malacia, if he doesn't start the first game, I think he should get in there, because he does the types of things that Ten Hag wants his team to do. He's a better passer than Shaw as well, although I think Shaw may be a better crosser of the ball. I'm not sure yet.
So he might be an exciting one to watch if we want to move to a United defender in the future and he nails down that spot. Something I thought was really interesting is obviously Ten Hag's not had much time with the team. But something I saw, which I thought was quite telling, was I saw a few kind of, I guess, freeze frames from the match yesterday of United in and out of possession. And one thing I noticed is very quickly he's managed to, maybe it was just a screenshot, story doesn't show what happened before and after, but in the screenshots anyway, kind of when they were in possession, it looked like they were building up like City from the back. And when they were out of possession, it looked like they were pressing like Liverpool to get the ball back. And that's kind of how Martial got his goal, with a very good press. Mm-hmm. So I was actually quite impressed. So despite kind of me mocking United a little bit here and there and light jibes, I am a little bit concerned at how good Ten Hag actually is tactically, and that perhaps they have found someone like their own kind of Tuchel or Conte who can come in and get more out of these players than perhaps they were able to do on the previous managers. So that does worry me a little bit. And obviously the window is still open, and I know they've focused very long on Frankie. But as and when that gets wrapped up, potentially, like, they could very quickly start becoming a good team again. And I was kind of hoping it would take a few transfer windows. But just in that little preseason game, I don't want to get too carried away, but they look very organized under him. And I think what I saw from Ranić, he said it last season, is he said that the players just kind of went out on the pitch and just did whatever they wanted. They just kind of made it up spontaneously, and that he'd given them tactical instructions and they just kind of didn't follow any of it. I think specifically pointing to the attacking players. But it definitely felt like already after a short time that they are kind of listening to the tactics and they respect the new coach. So that worries me. In terms of assets, there were some questions in the chat as well, just before we move on to the defenders for the rest of the show. They're asking about the likes of kind of Sancho and Bruno this season. Martial's a 7 million if CR7 leaves. I guess what I would say there is, like, there's already people bringing in Rashford into their draft team. I think if he'd scored yesterday, we might have seen like 50% Rashford in Gameweek 1. So thank God he didn't. I'm sure you all know United have a massive global fan base, and a lot of their fan base play FPL. So in any given season of FPL, United players will have higher ownership because United fans will buy them. A lot of them are casual players, give up FPL after a few weeks, and those players will never leave their team. So it's like United players, if they're actually doing well, they bloody skyrocket. They're like 0.3 rise between game weeks. They're dangerous if they're doing well. So I'll keep my eye on them a bit in preseason. I do think Rashford obviously has not looked the same in the 18 months after his injury, but at 6.5, like, compared to the barren land around him in terms of assets, if he even nails down a spot and looks slightly good, slightly improves that decision-making in the final third, looks a bit like the Rashford of the seasons before that, he could be an incredible asset at 6.5. Like, he could be massively undervalued. I think Sancho's a bit more expensive, right? He's 7.5. He, again, could be a great asset. And I think for 0.5 more at the start of the season, you can get so many of those great 8 million players we spoke about. So it's not worth that punt to me there.
Right.
If you had like a 6.5 million spot and you need it in game week 1, I'm not too averse to starting with Rashford if it looks like he is the starter in that position after we see the rest of the preseason. It's a punt, right? But like, it's just, I would never have thought someone like Marcus Rashford would cost so little. Obviously, there's reason for it, but now they've got a coach and they seem to buy into his vision. And so I do think there is some exciting times ahead for him. But why don't you talk a bit about maybe Bruno and Ronaldo as well? Because people are talking about Ronaldo leaving. I'm not sure he will. I don't think Mendes has found anyone who wants to buy him. Chelsea don't want him. Bayern don't want him. No one seems to want him. So, like, I have a feeling like he's not going anywhere. But
I mean, well, just on quickly on Rashford and Sancho, they do present like, or Rashford does look like he could be good value if he gets regular starts and he performs the way he has in the past, excluding last season. That's a lot of ifs and ands, though. Right now, these players, like what we're talking about, I think everybody's getting carried away for over one preseason game, both like Man United fans and Man United haters. I think everyone's getting carried away. And I think there were some, I think there are patterns like the ones you mentioned, Nima, like the like being in the right position when you lose the ball and getting compact quickly, like these patterns that Eric Ten Hag, to your point, has instilled in the team. But as far as like players and positions, like I would be throwing all these players on the watch list. I think if Sancho, if they get a new right back, if you get a new right back, or another thing that Ten Hag could do is Bruno, since if the left side will be Rashford and Malacia, the right side could be, you could hold the right back and shift Bruno from central midfield. So getting into the Bruno talk here, going from that 10 into the right side, which we've seen him do before. When he shifts over to the right, his chance creation is usually higher. But if he shifts over to the right and maybe play some combinations with Sancho, I think that could be interesting. So it's all going to just depend on how the tactics unfold for United, and I think we just need more preseason for that.
No, great point. I think just one thing worth adding is obviously Bruno and Sterling now at Chelsea. They are in this kind of semi-premium price point that Son started at last season at 10 million. And with a lot of teams having two premiums already in kind of like a Salah and Haaland, or if you're Andy Martin or De Bruyne and Kane, it is going to be very difficult if you've gone big at the back to get to that third kind of 10 million asset. And you might need to rip up your team or wildcard to get there. So if we kind of see Sterling or Bruno hit the ground and tactics mean that they're key players with attacking threat, we might need to just be flexible enough to get to them and not kind of be stuck in our ways of not wanting them. I think Bruno, obviously, if Ronaldo leaves, which I don't think he will, you never know. He could even like play false nine at times, right? If Martial's out of form, or he could at least play a bit more of an attacking 10 position as well, maybe on the right wing, as you're saying. So I definitely think there's some exciting assets to monitor, but for me, United is probably still more of a monitor. The only one I might be able to start a season with, I was super sold on him starting the first few weeks, is Rashford, just because he's so cheap. But outside of that, I don't see myself kind of going to any of them. So let's go to the kind of the goalkeepers, defenders, the metrics, FDRs, all of that. Before we do that, let's just give a couple more shout outs to a few people who've joined in while we've been going through the matchup. So hi to Harry Dawson, thanks for tuning in. We have Amund has come as well. Bonsoir, my friend. JLo FPL, good to see you. He says United beat Liverpool 4-0 because of the no Ronaldo effect. Yeah, so I guess there's also Ericsson. So we've not really talked about him. I know it's not been announced yet, but I wonder what that means. Is he just rotating with Bruno? Where does he sit? Is it McFred still in the DM roles? De Jong arrived. So I think, again, your matchup will probably be updated close to game week 1, and a lot will change by then. Before we go into the next segment, I want to make more use of the sea shanty. So I'm just going to bang it out while we have a quick sip of our water. And for a lot of the viewers who weren't here at the beginning, this is our new kind of intro outro music. So please let us know in the chat if you like the new song. And if you're kind of finding this episode useful, please do hit like. It really helps us. But yeah, here's a little bit of a sea shanty for you to enjoy. Great. So as if by magic, the FDR summary from last week is now here for the fence. For anyone who wasn't here last week and for the podcast listeners, I'll give you a very quick overview. So we have the kind of the Net That Haul defensive rankings for FDR on the left, but then we have the Fantasy Football Hub FDR rankings. So what we've done is take a defensive average rank and rank them this way because there were some discrepancies. So there's some teams like Brentford where Net That Haul's metric thought they were 9th for defense, whereas the Hub thought they were 13th. So they've kind of averaged it 9th, joint 9th. So there's a few discrepancies. Like we had Newcastle down at 16th on the FDR for the first 5 game weeks. Hub had them up at 9th, so we've averaged them down at 13th. So just to read the kind of the top teams. So we've got Man City and Liverpool tied in 1st on the average ranking, Chelsea in 3rd, Spurs in 4th, Brighton in 5th, Arsenal in 6th, Crystal Palace in 7th, Aston Villa in 8th, Brentford, West Ham and Wolves all in 9th. It's kind of going back to what we discussed with the free matchup teams. See Man United's 12th, Leicester's 15th. You know, like these aren't teams I want to be starting my season with. Yeah, like no chance by me. I just can't see an argument to start with one of their defenders for the first 5 weeks. Is there anything apart from the kind of discrepancies between Hub and Net That Haul's defensive FTR? Is there anything else that you feel like particularly calling out, or should we go to the kind of more of the detailed content? Do you think that's good enough to give an overview?
Yeah, I think that's a good enough overview. I would say keep an eye on Brighton as we go through through these assets. I think they're a team that few people are talking about these days.
Yeah, no, that's a good shout. I have Dunk in my draft. He's been in my draft from the beginning. I might downgrade him to like a Neco Williams to save $500,000, but we'll see. I really like him. I can play him in certain weeks and bench him in others at that price point. I think the only reason he got a price drop to 4.5 is because of some of the injuries last year. So this was kind of the FDR comparison Gameweek 1 to 5 with Net That Haul. For anyone who can't see on podcast, I'll just kind of read it out. So I think we got Man City was first for us with an 11.2 across the 5 game weeks. That's an 11.2 green. Liverpool was there as well with 9.9. We then had Spurs at 6.6. We had Chelsea at 6.2, Arsenal at 4.9, and the only other real ones of note are Brighton at 3.1 over these 5 weeks. In terms of really bad ones, I guess it's just worth calling out. So Bournemouth are a -10, so that's a huge 20-point swing the other way in terms of negative. So
these numbers are cumulative from 1 through 5, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's for all 5 weeks combined. Then you have kind of Southampton -9.4 for the first 5, Nottingham Forest -9.2. We have Newcastle at -6.6. We have Fulham at -7.7. So obviously the promoted teams have a tough start. We're not very hot on Newcastle for the opening 6. We'll look at that more. United is -4.1, and then there's some kind of like teams like West Ham and Wolves are kind of neutral. They're not really great or bad either way. There's obviously the individuals. I won't read those out if you're listening on podcast. If you go to the 48-minute timestamp, you'll see the screen grab of kind of each team, their first 5 opponents, and the individual FDRs rather than the combined FDR for the first 5 weeks. And it can help you. But I think this is why we're seeing big at the back, right? So immediately you can see that from the kind of the short list of teams we were talking about, the big teams, the top 6 teams of last season, most of them have an incredible start from a defensive FDR point of view. And it makes it really hard not to kind of go with them. Even though there's value 4.5s and 5 mils out there, it kind of feels like a no-brainer to be starting with a Liverpool, City, Chelsea defender, maybe some kind of Spurs asset, even Arsenal at 4.5, right? That's kind of my biggest takeaway. Like, it just doesn't seem like the position to start game week 1 with and go for like a punt. Like, it just doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think for those assets, it's going to be the balance, how we balance it. Do we go one from each team? Do we go heavy on one team and heavy on and lighter on another team? I mean, if you double up on one team, that, you know, if you double up, say, on the Liverpool defenders, that means you might not be getting a Chelsea defender. And then how do you combine it with the goalkeepers? The one thing I'll say about the promoted sides, I think Mariner takes 2/3 of their championship stats away, or like makes it, you know, 2/3 worse, I guess. I guess statistically, that's kind of how it works out. Think of Tony last season, right? He scored, what was it, 13 goals? And he scored like 31 in the championship the year before that. So it's going to be roughly that. But yeah, I don't know, like it's balancing the attack and the defense for me. Like it says Man City here at 11.2, but how many defenders from Man City can you get, and which ones are rotation prone? Liverpool, you know, maybe Trent and Robbo might be nailed, or Van Dijk will certainly be nailed. So do you go more heavy on a Liverpool defense since they're more nailed? And so you got to kind of find the opportunity and expected minutes as well.
That's a great shot. I think the goalkeeper point is worth looking at as well. So something I've been looking at is I toyed with Edison in a draft, and I was kind of convinced, you know, he's going to get a certain amount of points. It's great. You know, the City and Liverpool probably get the most clean sheets. But then it got me thinking, I've already got Cancelo and Haaland, and if I lock in Edison, I don't want to be changing goalkeepers. And although we don't think any other City attacker is nailed, what happens if a couple of weeks in, like, you see someone like a Mahrez or a Grealish or a Foden suddenly look amazing, and like you want to get on them, and you've locked yourself out with that defensive asset just because he was like value at 5.5. So that's kind of made me err a bit more on caution. And it's actually got me leaning a bit towards Lloris, who obviously appears here at 6.6. And I'm sure we'll talk about Spurs, and I know you've got some stuff about Perisic, but I've not had Perisic in any drafts yet. I wasn't kind of leaning that way despite the close to 50% ownership so far, which does scare me. So seeing a kind of 4 or 5% owned Lloris at 5.5, who did incredibly well, you know, I think he was the second highest goalkeeper last season. And this is despite Spurs going through a horrendous spell before Conte came. So it's like, even with that crap period, he still did so well, made incredible saves. So, like, you know, there's Kane and Son. I can't see a world in which I'd have both when there's also Salah, Haaland. If Haaland flops, maybe Salah becomes like a Son or a KDB or a Kane. But I can't see myself getting both their premium attackers at any point. It would just be one probably because of the other premium assets I want in attack. Perisic, I'm not so hot on. So is Lloris like actually a better shout for someone like me, where I can set and forget him because I don't need that third Spurs spot, because I'm on, like, you know, if I've just got, say, the goalkeeper, Lloris, and one of the premium attackers at some point, Kane or Son, I still have a third spot open anyway if a value in like a Kulusevski appears or a Richarlison. But where it's City, I just feel like there's so much upside in City. I don't want to lock myself in with the goalkeeper despite the great FDR. So that's just a key thing I wanted to get out there. And then in terms of, I guess, Liverpool, I think Trent at 7.5 is great value. So obviously a lot of people, nearly everyone will start with him, I'm sure. The biggest debate there, I suppose, is do we see Robertson at 7 million as better value than Diaz at 8 million? Now, I think you can't look at it in isolation, right? Because if you've got Diaz, you probably have like a 5 mil defender with it. There's probably a lot of good 5 mil defenders. If you have Robertson at 7 mil, yes, he's 1 million cheaper than Diaz. But does that mean that with Robertson, you've got like a 5.5 mil mid? Is that combination of Robertson and a cheap enabling mid worse than Diaz? And so I think this is, again, where combinations come into it. Because on paper, I'd love the Robertson Trent double up with Salah as my third. But again, I feel like there's so many value defenders. I don't want to double up on Liverpool defense either. So that then leaves who? Chelsea, right? So we've seen teams with James and Chilwell. James is almost 50% owned already. Chilwell's just like 11%. They're both 6 million. That feels incredibly low. Some people have asked in the chat about, you know, Shamir from Fantasy Pavilion as well. Big love to you. He's asked obviously about how do we feel about the potential coming transfers. I know we've seen Koulibaly's like signed. There's talks of Aki. If they don't get Aki, there's someone else they're after as well. So I would say that for me personally, like, I think this whole idea of them going back to a back four is being overblown. Like, we're talking about these Liverpool and City fullbacks, and like they will play a back four, and I wouldn't just write off the kind of Chelsea wingbacks personally, Gabe, because they moved to a back four. Like, I know it's a new system, they'd have to learn it, but I think bringing in Koulibaly to replace Rudiger, if they stay in a back three and they bring in Aki as well, then actually, like, I can't see a world in which I wouldn't have one of those two fullbacks. And for me, the question actually is, do you have like which fullback from Chelsea, and do you double up with Mendy at 5 million? Like, is that 500,000 saved from like Lloris down to Mendy? Is that worth it? Because again, I can't see myself wanting like 3 Chelsea players anytime soon in the first few weeks. So maybe I could live with a Mendy and a Chilwell, or a Mendy and a James, leave one spot open in case like have a sort of Sterling breaks out or Mount breaks out. So that was kind of just my initial kind of thinking. But yeah, I think the goalkeeper you need to think about. Yes, it would be great to get them because they're much cheaper this year from the premium teams. But is that going to block any potential down the line? And for me, having that City spot open for an attacker that might emerge, or having that kind of Liverpool combination with a better defender and Diaz just seems more value. So Chelsea's the only one I can see myself personally doubling up on, because I know you're talking about doubling up, but I feel like I've kind of verbal diarrhea there. So I'll let you unpack that.
No, but you did hit on several, I think, key points that I think are really interesting, and regarding combinations and goalkeepers. So the FML FPL guys were having a really good conversation about goalkeepers, and they kind of turned me off of Ederson, because Ederson is
shout out to them, by the way. They were the first podcast I ever listened to when I started playing FPL.
Same here. They were first. And Ederson just doesn't get bonus points. I think he had 3 or 4 bonus points all season last season, despite having over 700 baseline bonus. But their midfielders just rack up so much baseline bonus that Ederson is rarely in the bonus points. Alisson is really interesting because he's the goalkeeper that has the most bonus points, or that had the most bonus points last season. But again, that ties up a Liverpool spot. But if you're comparing, if you're thinking Robbo at 7 mil versus Alisson at 5.5 to save 1.5, plus you're getting, a player that had, let me see, what did he have? 15 bonus points last season. So you're looking at almost a bonus point every other game. That's not bad.
I guess Robbo as well, he probably, you could say he outperforms maybe his expected assists, and how likely is that to continue going for a long time? Whereas with Alisson, you're confident in the points you're going to get.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Alisson has gone, I'd have to go back and look, but they mentioned basically almost right around 100, within 10 points of 170 points for the last 3 seasons. Or at least it works out that way per game. I know there was the one season he was injured where I think he hurt his knee early on, something like that. So I've been looking more, and I think Lloris is nice because he does get saves. He does get bonus points. I think he had 11 bonus points last season, which is pretty good. And he had over 700 BPS. So I've been trending more towards the Lloris side as well. But also because I don't want any Spurs defenders. I don't want Dyer. I don't want Doherty. I don't want Perisic.
I think Dyer scored in preseason. You sure you don't want him?
Positive. Now I'm convinced even more. I hope a lot of people go for him. I don't want any of these people. I mean, the Perisic hype I think has been hilarious. When he was with Conte, he would often be subbed at less than 60 minutes because he's old as fuck. So he can't run the way Conte. He knows he's a good example of what Conte wants to do. So he's a good model for the players. He's a great buy for Spurs, I think. But he's going to be playing half the game every single game. You're going to get a bunch of 1-pointers from Perisic if he's healthy. So I think he's a hard avoid for me. And Lloris is the kind of the best way into Spurs attack and Spurs defense, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I've started thinking, because I can't see myself going for Perisic. If I was going to go for him, I will say this for everyone who has him. I do think the start of the season is the time, just because they'll want to bed him in. And for those first 4 weeks, there's no European games just yet. But what people haven't been talking about a lot, and I think Zoff from The Wire said this, he's surprised no one's talking about this. They've congested all the group stage games, I think it's 6 matches, before the World Cup in November. And if it's not in the first 4 weeks, then does that mean September, October, November, including a 2-week international break in there? In that very small window of 8 weeks, there's basically a midweek game every week. So these guys have been playing 3 games every 7 days once that starts. So that's why I would say if you are going for Perisic, I don't mind it as a shout for game week 1, just because his high ownership could obviously destroy you if he does start them all. We know he's capable of insane attacking returns. I think he had double-digit attacking returns last season. Obviously not in the Premier League is the caveat. But if there was a time to go for him, or any of these kind of more exciting fullbacks, I think the beginning of the season is the time before Champions League and Europa League kick in. And then maybe it is that you do need to move off him later. Whereas we've seen kind of Spurs FDRs defensively longer term than even these first 5 weeks. And they look pretty good for quite a while. So actually, I wouldn't want to kind of go for him and then make that move later. So I am really leaning towards a Lloris at the same price and just kind of keeping him long term and not messing around with that goalkeeper position till my first wildcard. So that's my thoughts there. There's a lot of teams looking at Son to start with for Kane. Some have Kane over Haaland. Some have Son as well as Salah and Haaland. They've kind of snuck him in, and you don't want to see the rest of their team structure, but they've managed somehow. They have like your favorite boy Matip instead of Trent, and they have stuff like that going on. Like the backline looks a bit rogue. The bench looks even roguer than most benches that are already rogue. I think that's a big point on Spurs. Like Kulusevski as well. Like I know a lot of people would be interested in him at 8 mil, another one of those 8 mil assets with Richarlison banned for game week 1. But I think that's bad news because it means because he's banned in game week 1, we won't get any insight into what that rotation will look like across the front four. So again, I think he's a hard avoid for me. Yeah, he's a big hard avoid for me at Kulusevski for now. He's at a price point where you can get to him if you start with someone else that I think for me, like a Saka or Diaz, they're the standout 8 million midfielders. But it is about defenders, so I'll go back to that. I know it's about combinations. So I guess just let's. I think everyone kind of understands the appeal of Chelsea, City, Liverpool, Spurs. We spoke about. Why don't we talk about the cheaper assets in like Arsenal, Brentford, Brighton, who we said all of them have pretty appealing starts. They have much more affordable assets. Leicester's worth a call out because a lot of people like to look at their 4.5 fullbacks, but in the first 5 they face Brentford, Arsenal, Southampton, Chelsea, United. The other one a minus 5.4 FDR for Mariners metric. Doesn't look so appealing. Again, it kind of feels to me like a wait and buy on first wildcard kind of scenario here. And like obviously Ricardo and like Justin, there's lots of fullbacks that are exciting there, but I think it was Castagna last season as well. Like it's just not for me with those fixtures. I'm a fixtures boy. But going back to Arsenal, they have 4.9 in the first 5 weeks. Brentford have 1, but they do have some good ones there. Maybe they can be benched in some of the tougher games. Brighton have a 3.1. They have some pretty great games as well. As I said, I've got Dunk right now in a draft. Even Crystal Palace doesn't look bad at 2.0, right? I think those are all teams worth calling out because they all have good options at 4.5 and 5 million. Are you looking to start the season with any of those defenders? I know Tommy Arsu's in about 20% of teams at the moment. He's probably the main one that I've seen.
I think it's the conversation that I'd like to start is the Arsenal defenders versus Brighton defenders. The 4-5s, the Tomiyasus and Ben Whites of the world versus the, let's see, who's Dunk, right?
Yeah, he's 4.5, yeah.
4.5. Lamptey's 4.5, although I don't know if he's going to start or if it'll be Solly March on that right-hand side. Cucurella, we don't know if he's 5.0 though, isn't he?
Yeah, but I think if he goes to City, that will throw up a whole nother conversation and look at this.
If Cucurella goes to City, he'll have higher ownership than Holland.
He'll be the highest owned bloody defender come game week 1. My God.
And then Kyle Walker will start, and Cancelo will be on the left.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a conversation worth having. Just Arsenal defenders versus Brighton defenders. The Brighton, let's see. I don't know. I guess according to the FDR here, the Brighton fixtures do look a little bit better. Palace away is difficult for Arsenal. Leicester can't score. We talked about that earlier. And Villa can score as well. So it's just kind of like the Bournemouth Fulham fixtures. And then for Brighton, we're looking at Newcastle home, maybe, but Newcastle's attack is much improved as well. Leeds home, again, maybe, but yeah, I guess they lost Rafinha, so that's pretty good. And then Fulham away is pretty good as well. So one could make the case that that Dunk over Tomiyasu. Are you going with both? Are you favoring the Brighton player? What do you think?
So I have both at the moment with a Dunk on the bench against United. I like Tomiyasu. I really like. He was that's why I'm wearing the Japan jersey. To be honest, I bought this jersey before he joined Arsenal because I just think it looks fucking sick. But also, I spent 6 months in high school in Tokyo when I was 17. For any new listeners, so I have a bit of a weird backstory there that you'll find out about in the members Discord. I'm sure I'll tell you more about the dark nights in Roppongi pretending to be over 20 so I could access drinks, and they thought I was a gaijin. But that's for a different day. Yeah, no, I love Tomiyasu. For me, he was like one of our best players last season. He was honestly like just so assured, so two-footed. He covered for any of the kind of the weaknesses of Ben White. He was incredible. I think Ben White, he is also in some teams, but it's not for me because as Mike Halpin has asked in the chat, it's obviously going to be interesting to see what happens with Saliba, and he can obviously cover that right back role, right centre back role. I don't want to necessarily go for Ben White for that reason. Gabriel's too expensive for me. Tierney could be amazing. I've seen him on some of the now the kind of FPL optimized have come out and FPL review data has come out with the predicted season data. Tierney does show up very well, but I just can't go for a player that I know that has burnt me so many times with his glass legs. It's not for me. So yeah, I can't go that way. So for me, if I'm going to go for the back line, it would be Tomiyasu. I'm not willing to pay 5 million for Ramsdale because someone had asked about Ramsdale. I'm not willing to pay that when Mendy is 5 million. When Raya is 4.5, when Sanchez is 4.5, I'm not paying 5 for Ramsdale personally. Tomiyasu is the one I really like the most, and he's currently in my team. Interesting you ask. So when I was looking to bring in Neco Williams to free up $500,000, maybe it's my bias, but it was Dunk I kept removing because I kept telling myself, well, if Dunk is on my bench in game week 1, why would I sell Tomiyasu and not the one who's on my bench? And then maybe that $500,000 gets me. I'd only do it if it got me an upgrade, basically. So yeah, you might see me get really hyped and get $500,000 to buy Rashford, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. No, I like both of them. I think Brentford's also worth a call out. I don't think they're as good as Brighton, so I probably wouldn't start there. But I know that when we look at the power tables of individual players and 4.5s, maybe we go to their next. Actually, let's go to some of the next because there's a lot of rich data that I think we're talking about anyway. So it'd be good to have it visually up on screen for everyone. Oh God, Ahmed knows about Pongi. So just quickly before we go, I'm going to try and use his Scandinavian support here to pronounce. I'm going to say Haaland the way I've been saying it this whole time. And now I'm going to try and say it the way he's told me to say it, which is, for anyone, so it's Haaland.
There you go. Haaland. Tell us how we did, Aman.
Yeah, let us know if it's Haaland. For anyone who doesn't know on podcast, say the word horny and replace the RMY with land. Haaland. Cool. Good luck, guys. Yeah, sorry, I know I'm a bit immature, but just before we look at the power tables, a quick thing. So the blocks, Liverpool and City are long-term holds. So I think even though I was talking about not wanting to lock out your third spot with Alisson or Edison, if you did get them, you would have to commit to that strategy. You can't be taking hits to sell them to then buy another one of their attackers from those teams. Mm-hmm. If you're going to go the whole hog, you need to keep them. These guys have great fixture block throughout. Arsenal have a decent block between 2 and 5. Brighton have a good block between 4 and 8, which is again one of the reasons Dunk is in my team, not for game week 1. Chelsea 1 to 7. So again, I could see a reason for the Mendy and Chilwell or Chilwell and James double up there. Spurs is game week 3 to 6. So unless it's Lloris, I can see an argument to wait. And actually, their good fixture block coincides with Europe starting, so not ideal. West Ham's block is 7 to 10. So that's, again, quite exciting long term. You could maybe move there, and there are some decent options if it doesn't go well. And then jump off. So we've said here Wolves is a jump off at game week 6. The numbers aren't great anyway. They only have 1 or 2 positive defensive FDRs in game week 1 and 5. And then it gets really bad. So although Johnny's exciting, Nuri could be good. Again, I don't see myself starting with Wolves and wanting to sell a 4.5 million defender 6 weeks in. But if you did, you could do like Johnny to a West Ham defender. That could be the switch you make. And for anyone watching on video or if you're on podcast, 1 hour, 8-minute timestamp, you can see the screenshot of the fixture swings and blocks for defense. Kind of Arsenal, Villa, Brighton, Chelsea, Spurs, West Ham, they're all kind of highlighted in the FDR table, which I'm not going to kill you all with the data. Let's briefly look at these rotations. These are interesting. And then we'll go to actual individual players at different price points because there's a lot of slides to go. And I think we might need to start rattling through. So we've got a Palace-Brentford rotation, a Tottenham-West Ham rotation, Arsenal-Tottenham rotation, and Arsenal-Newcastle is a great rotation. So like Tomiyasu and Trippier, like that could be an incredible rotation that gets you Forest, Leicester, Bournemouth, Fulham, Villa, Palace, Everton. I really like that. In fact, I think Arsenal, Newcastle can rotate all the way to game week 38 as it stands without facing a top 6 team. So they're not even just for these first few weeks. They are a fantastic rotation going forwards. Even Arsenal, Tottenham. So if you did want to go for a Perisic and a Tomiyasu, for instance, or White. Southampton home, Leicester home, Wolves away, Forest home, Villa home, Fulham home, Everton home. So again, there's great option there. Tottenham West Ham allows you to get the West Ham defender early now and not wait till their fixture swinging in week 7. Palace Brentford's a really interesting one because they both have decent FDRs for the first 5, and you can cover some of their worst fixtures. But even with the rotation, it's not for me because it still has like Arsenal, United, twice United, in fact, actually, and then Newcastle is away. So it's not ideal to me. But I know Mariner just wanted to mess around with the FDRs, find 4 rotation kind of blocks that could be interesting. But again, 1 hour, 10 minutes for anyone on podcast if you want to have a look at the individual FDRs. And I'm going to bring you back in, Gabe, because now we're actually going to look at kind of like goalkeepers from these teams. We talked a lot about these guys, but let's actually look at like individual rankings of them against each other rather than what was perhaps our subjective opinion before based on just the team FDR. Now we've got the power tables for goalkeepers. So this is super exciting. These are all thanks to Mariner again. So hopefully he'll be back next week, as I said. But why don't you take this one away? And it is fascinating, isn't it? Like Ramsdale is here despite what I said shitting on him earlier.
Well, I mean, if we've been talking about good Arsenal fixtures, right? And when we all want Arsenal players, we're looking at Tomiyasu. Sometimes some people, I think some initial drafts were doubling up with Ben White and Tomiyasu, right? Then Ramsdale certainly has to be a consideration. But I mean, it's the usual suspects. What I find interesting is that Lloris is above Ederson, and when we go like across the stats, so I'm just going to rattle off what the categories are for the people on the podcast. So we have price, minutes, clean sheets, goals conceded. I'm assuming this is all per 90, right? No.
Yeah. So
I don't know what that is.
Just double check.
I don't know what that is.
So no. So I think I'm trying. Which column are you talking about? Sorry.
I just want to name them all. I don't know what this. Oh,
yeah,
so I think it's their rank. It's their rank.
I think it's just the rank. Yeah. So the numbers aren't even metrics. They're just like with each metric, what's the rank, and then the aggregates are on the far right, I think. But
right. So
yeah. So like for minutes,
save percentage. Yeah. What's PPS?
Points for, I guess, save maybe. Who knows? Like that one will have to like that one's very
That's a good guess.
Predicted points. Maybe first for predicted points, joint second for predicted points.
Yeah, then we got BPS for 90, value, FDR, prod, who knows what that is, and then their ultimate rank. And Lloris is in second place here, and I think where he beats Ederson quite a bit is, well, the value. I'm not sure how Mariner determines that value.
So I think the value was based on like the price and the points output last season. Yeah, like almost like a points per million version of his own.
I see. And so like it's a much better value in terms of the points there for Lloris. So I think that's interesting. But one of the rotations was Palace and Brentford, right? So just looking here, we have Guaita or whoever is gonna be in goal for Palace, and Raya ranked pretty highly, 5th and 8th respectively. So if you did want to play that rotation, I think that's an option if you're into the goalkeeper rotation. We've mentioned on previous shows that the reason we don't like goalkeeper rotation is that when a goalkeeper has an unexpectedly good performance or a top team has an unexpectedly bad performance, usually you miss out on a haul from that goalkeeper. Could be 10, 11, 12 points, depending on what happened in that game. So I prefer to just stick with a goalkeeper, keep them in there, and know that the goalkeepers aren't going to be too different at the end of the season, and at least get those hauls instead of trying to predict the outcome there.
Yeah, I think to maximize points, obviously rotation of like 2 cheaper defenders could match the output of one of these more premium ones that cost $1 million more. But there is a big chance you're going to make some errors. And when you bench like the defender against a bad team, like a bad fixture for them, so against a good team, that could be when they inevitably save a penalty in Hall. So it's too risky for me. I have historically never really gone for premium goalkeepers. So most of my preseason drafts so far were kind of Raya. I then kind of tinkered all the way up to Ederson, as I said. I looked at Mendy. I'm now thinking about Lloris. It's very odd for me to be looking at this kind of 5.5 million defender goalkeeper price point to start a season with. I'm not quite sure what's happened to me with the time off. Clearly, something's gone wrong.
Official FPL changed the pricing. You know,
that's what it is. It's just so appealing suddenly.
Well, I think that's one way they've really made the game better, is that now we have a decision. You know, we're not going to get a goalkeeper from a top team at 6.0. We're just not going to do it. We can get a defender with bonus point potential, with goal scoring potential, etc. And we'll never go for the goalkeeper. But now with the pricing that changed, like in seasons past, Ramsdale would be 5.5, Mendy would be 5.5, and Lloris, Allison, and Ederson would be 6.0. And we'd rather just go for those defenders in that case. But now we have decisions to make, and the goalkeeper, and I think maybe that's what gave rise to the goalkeeper power tables. It's thanks to the official FPL giving us a decision to make. So now Mariner has made a metric, which is super exciting.
I mean, just to add, like Neil Zapp was in the chat. He said this is exactly what happens to him when he rotates goalies. The one with the shit fixture saves a penalty and gets free bonus. Exactly. Yeah, that is painful. I think another question that's popping up from FDR Summary is saying, what are your thoughts on locking a Liverpool Man City slot with a set and forget goalkeeper to first wildcard? I think City more so than Liverpool, because Liverpool, there are definitely nailed assets that I would want in all three positions outfield. City, I can see more of an argument for. I think you may have missed this part before you joined, but I was saying I'd still like to keep that third City slot open just in case like a Mahrez or a Foden or a Grealish appears, and you know, like they seem like a must-have and they're nailed. I want to be able to get to them, and I don't want to have to take a hit to sell a set and forget Ederson. You'd have to stick to that strategy. So for me, if I was going to spend that big money, it would actually be Lloris. Interestingly, Mendy, despite the 5 million price, he's all the way down in 7th in the power table ranking. I think his minutes is probably harming him a bit here, just because obviously he was away for AFCON. So I do wonder if we asked Mariner to kind of tweak those minutes potentially, would that make him go far higher up the table based on the fact that his price is pretty insane value? Equally, like I do love the look of Chilwell or James or both. So yeah, maybe Lloris is the one for me from a set and forget. He talks about Pickford at 4.5. Yeah, I think I agree. 4.5 could be great, but Everton's just it's a no-go for me from a goalkeeper point of view at this stage. They really need to get their shit together. But yeah, I think Crystal Palace, whoever the goalkeeper will be, whether it's Gato or not, that could be a rogue differential shout. Sanchez could be great if you wanted to go Sanchez instead of Raya. I think that's fair. But I just really like the Raya and Dunk combo over the alternative of kind of like Sanchez and a Brentford defender personally. But that's just my 2 pence. Cool. Let's look at the defenders under 5 million then in a similar ranking. And lo and behold, you got Janssen here from Brentford. As I was talking about, he's the 4.5 that Mariner said stands out. I think, yeah, that's one thing worth noting. You got Klein from Crystal Palace, Anderson from Crystal Palace, Gahey I like from Palace, Dunk we've already called out, Veltman 4.5. Then White is here, although I prefer Tomiyasu, who's not here. Sessegnon's here. Simicas is there, but obviously that's only interesting if Robbo suddenly gets injured long term. Regulion's there, but this is where the metric kind of doesn't match the context of like the numbers don't understand that Conte does not look to use this guy long term. But yeah, like it's interesting, isn't it? Like the only kind of teams that appear here, right, are Brentford, Crystal Palace, Brighton, a cheap Spurs and Liverpool player, and yeah, Arsenal, I guess. Villa's there with Mings, but I think I'd probably go 5 mil for Dean or Cash for the extra 500,000 in the attacking threat. But is there anyone here that like you would be going with in Gameweek 1? Anything you're excited about? These, by the way, there's a few versions of this table. I think this one's prioritizing the ranks based on like how nailed they were.
So yeah, like focusing on nailedness. I think Jensen is really interesting. I know he had he kept, like, you know, just watching him at the end of the last season, I felt like he was in the box quite a bit. And that's who I was going to bring up in the previous slide. But moving down, I would love for Sessegnon to get to nail down a spot. If Sessegnon nailed down a spot, that's the Spurs defender I think I would be really interested in. But other than that, it's you know, probably looking to get one of these. Brighton, I think, has the best fixtures. But Ben White or Tomiyasu, I think they could be interchangeable here. Ben White / Tomiyasu maybe play that they have the best team. Jansen, there's a point of attacking. They all have their risk or their limitations, but at 4-5, it's a good price point to choose one. If I were to choose 1-4-5, right now I've been on Tomiyasu. He's been nailed in most of my teams. I might be tempted by Dunk. Depending on what happens in the preseason, how Arsenal and how Tomiyasu specifically looks. And if Perisic is out, and it looks like Sessegnon's going to get any time, then I'm definitely interested in him.
I think it's worth noting, if this is based on the last 6 previous nailedness, makes sense why Tomiyasu is not here after he was coming back from his injury. So this is sorted by the power rank now. So as opposed to how nailed they were and how many minutes they had, suddenly Sessegnon flies right to the top. Past Regulion, past Janssen, past Gay. So, you know, if you forget nailedness, suddenly Sessegnon is exactly what you said, right? Based on the power rank.
Yeah.
He is by far the most exciting. Tomiyasu does appear here. He's quite far down. I suppose he doesn't carry as much attacking threat. More of an inverted right back. He kind of defends for Ben White pushing forward, right? Tucks in.
I don't know. I don't know if it's that so much, or if it's that that Tierney just gets too far forward on the left side, and so Tomiyasu has to hold back. I think I'd have to look into like maybe some heat maps and some just to do a little tactical analysis to see why Tomiyasu is held back. And is it only when Tierney plays, or is he held back to cover for was Nuno Tavares playing or someone like that they needed cover? So maybe the entire line was shifted a little bit to the left to cover for that left side, and that shift to the left could hold Tomiyasu back.
That's a really good tactical point, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that may continue, and I think that's a potential risk for Tomiyasu for sure.
Interestingly, talking about the Brentford Crystal Palace rotation, based on the power rank alone in the last 6 game weeks, Janssen and Gay, they're definitely up there. It's viable. That could be done. Let's keep going. So this is all teams, I guess. So for the people asking why weren't kind of say like Everton defenders in here, I know some people ask about Tarkowski and stuff. I think these are all like the specific shortlisted teams that had the best FDRs, whereas this one now it's all teams. So this one you'll notice it does include Mikalenko, Keane, Lorente from Leeds. It includes Castagna from Leicester. So this is obviously a bit more holistic. But yeah, again, Janssen and Sessegnon, and Gay, they just, whatever type of ranking we're using, whichever way we slice Mariner's metrics, these guys seem kind of like cut out at the top. Castagna does come in near the top half. So he's definitely, I think, once the fixtures improve, those Leicester fullbacks, they are one to watch. Justin's a bit further down there, but again, just worth keeping in mind how they get on. People are talking about Anderson having like a big eye for goal in the chat, but other people asking who the hell Tarkowski is. I think Tarkowski might cost 5 million or something, so maybe that's why he's not here, or he just does not rank well for Burnley, and we're using his Burnley data, I imagine. So
yeah, I don't see any Burnley players here, right?
No, exactly. Yeah, I think let's keep going. Let's go to the more exciting price point, because we're all going to have maybe 4.5 if that. Some people might have 2 to rotate, but these are kind of under 6 million. So Doherty flies in straight at the top based on power rank for the last 6. For 5 million, again, he's basically this price point's version of Sessegnon, right? You kind of, if you think he has no competition for right back and he's going to start the season there, he could be interesting. You got Chalobah from Chelsea is 5 mil. I'm not so convinced there. Aki 5 mil because Chelsea is still not so impressed. I think I'd rather Mendy than either of the pair of them, or spend the extra million on the more expensive fullback. Alonso, I'm not sure if he'll still be there, but there's an argument that 5.5, if Chilwell was injured again or had a setback, that could be appealing. Janssen is so good, and so is Sessegnon, that they still show up in this goddamn table, despite there being more expensive players to compete against, right? Tierney shows up. So as I was saying, a lot of the algorithms love him early on. Dean shows up. So it's kind of similar, but you just see a few more Tottenham, Chelsea, City players who are obviously more expensive and weren't in the 4.5 region. So Nahal says Tarkovsky is 4.5. Yeah, so I just think Burnley's defensive numbers were too trash after they got relegated to show up in Mariners' last 6 entry.
I have Jansen and Tomiyasu in my draft right now.
And your goalkeeper is still Lloris or Edison or?
I dropped it to Mendy.
Mendy, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, see, I'm kind of like tinkering between Mendy and Lloris and Raya now. It's like I keep moving between different mindsets.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Niels is looking at this on like a 32-inch 4K screen compared to his iPhone, and yeah, like I'm pretty sure this is not readable on a phone screen. I'll give you that much. I'm sure we should give Mariner the feedback that we had last season, but I think it's disappeared. Was on the right-hand column, we should list what's on the left-hand column again, because when you're all the way over here, it's kind of hard to scan all the way back to see what person or team you were looking at. So I know he's on holiday abroad with no internet speed, so fair play for him to still pulling this together for us and getting the pack out. So these are all teams now. So we've gone from the selected teams again to all teams. Everyone's kind of still the same at the top, right? The only difference I see now is Cassius snuck in, Stones has snuck in, Trippier has arrived. Diego Llorente keeps showing up despite playing for Leeds. So that's one I need to question later on. But I've seen a lot of teams with Kyle Walker, they're convinced he's nailed. Obviously, Cucurella hasn't signed. But the talk of the town seems to be that if Cucurella signs, Cancelo will play right back. But we don't know what Pep will really do. And as it stands, if Cucurella doesn't sign, could you be tempted by Walker at 2 million less than Cancelo?
Walker?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what's going to happen with what? Like that's one of those unknown. Like at right back, will Zinchenko come into the left side? Will he get some minutes? Will Cancelo move over? I just think it's too many questions to waste on a City spot. I think when you get a City spot, go for as nailed as you can. Like, you know, the talisman of the defense, Cancelo, right? You could argue Diaz potentially a little bit up as well, but not Walker, not a fringe player on a premium team. Just to try to get a bargain, I don't think so. Get the best players from the best teams to start the season.
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree. Seeing if there's anyone else here that's interesting that we've not already discussed. I guess the main thing is even from 6 million and under, these kind of Crystal Palace and Brentford lads, they keep showing up. They are definitely ones to think about. And although the people in the chat say they have some of these players in their team, I'm not convinced I've seen them in many teams in the kind of Twitter template. So these could be a nice edge for some of us to go down that route. Let's keep monitoring pre-season, obviously. So this kind of defenders, again, all shortlisted teams. So this has everyone, including above 6 million. And you'll see that people like Ake and Doherty still show up despite being 5 million. Obviously, Diaz comes in top. Matip, your boy, comes in second. This is power rank, by the way, for last 6. Cancelo third, Doherty fourth, Robertson fifth, Laporte sixth. Van Dijk's up there, Reece James is up there, Trent is up there, Chilwell. Who else do we have? Anyone more expensive? No, the rest of them are all the cheaper assets. So, yeah, I think from my point of view, there is a real debate to be had about kind of Diaz or Laporte over Cancelo. Like, do we want to pay the 1 million extra? Personally, I've looked at some teams I can make where, like, let's say I have a 6 or 7 million mid. If I didn't have Cancelo and I had Diaz or Laporte, that 1 million became like an 8 million mid or a much better mid. I like them, but Cancelo just feels so talismanic. Like, he felt like he was the best playmaker at City after De Bruyne, and I wouldn't be shocked if he can do kind of 200+ point seasons like Trent and Robbo. So for me personally, with there being no Champions League for the first 4 weeks, I just think it will be madness for me to go without Cancelo. But obviously, if you can use that 1 million and it goes a long way and you can start with Diaz or Laporte, sure. Again, like, what about people who want to double up, Gabe? Like, anyone who wants to go with maybe Cancelo and Diaz or Cancelo and Laporte? So let's throw Walker out of that conversation.
That's a lot of money, right? It's to put on the back line, and they don't. I don't know. I mean, I think it's for the nailedness. I guess it makes sense. I wouldn't fault anyone for going in that direction. I guess, especially looking at the rankings here. And a double up could be a way to differentiate for sure.
Yeah, I think Nils mentions what if Pep is Pep and rotates Cancelo again. So I don't know about again. Cancelo had like the most minutes for City last season. I think he basically like for a while he played like 90 minutes every week. He wasn't even getting subbed off. So I think when players arrive in Pep's system, like they do take a time to bed in, and maybe he wanted to see something from him, and it took a while to get that. But at this point, I think he's one of the first names on the team sheet, especially with no Champions League for the first 4 weeks. Maybe that changes with a midweek game every single week after game week 4. But again, like it just, I think I wouldn't be going no City defender. I can see a total reasonable argument to get Diaz or Laporte instead, or Edison, whatever. But for me personally, it will be Cancelo in my team. He's not going anywhere. But as long as you have a City defender based on the FDRs we've seen, that they're going to challenge for the title, they're going to have the most clean sheets alongside Liverpool. I think you just need a City defender, a Liverpool defender. You can be interesting about what you do with it.
I think the presence of Holland is a big boost for Cancelo, because Holland needs he's one of the fastest players on the planet, right? And he needs I mean he's got good burst as well, but to get really that, like when you watch him in the Bundesliga, and he'd just glide by players, but he needs space, and I think those balls into space from Cancelo are going to be there, and I think the Cancelo to Holland connection will be on. So I'm with you. Cancelo's not going anywhere in my team. He's nailed in there.
I think if anything, I'd say he underperformed his numbers as opposed to like not being sustainable. So I'm very excited by him. I do agree though. Niels is right. I think he means 2021 season. So perhaps that was still time when he was bedding in a bit. But I think at this point in time, he's going to be one of the most trusted players for Pep. And until Champions League kicks in, I'd be very excited by him. So let's look at. So that was power ranking. This is sorted by on the field. So I think it's production of the teams. In this scenario, Matip and Chalobah and Doherty, Diaz, James, they all rise up. Janssen bloody flies up the table past nearly every premium apart from James and Matip. Yeah, this one's wild for me. I think what this is telling me is that like Perisic at 5.5 is great and all, but if Doherty's got that position nailed for his own and there's no one competing with him, at 5 million, that just seems like I would have to start with him with the fixtures they have. If I know that he's the only right back going into the start of the season, I'd be a bit tempted, Matip, I'm not even going to mention because I know he did you well, but I just can't see a world where like my third Liverpool spot will go to Matip. I know he could do well, but he's obviously more expensive than he was last season too now.
Yeah, I mean, I bought him at 4.9 last season. He's 6.0 this season. That's a pretty big difference. And then we also don't know. So, I mean, last season we had an idea. We saw Matip line, he'd start in the league, and we saw Konate start in the Champions League. And that was a pretty nailed pattern for quite some time. So there was more certainty in Matip. I think there are more questions around Matip to start this season. But yeah, Janssen just keeps flying by. Like he's above Robertson, he's above Cancelo, he's above Chilwell, Alonso, and this is by team productivity.
Yeah,
team productivity. So yeah, I mean, and can Brentford pick up where they left off last season? I think is also a question. I'm not sure about that. I think there's a little bit of risk on that front when you're talking about a team productivity perspective.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think Niels is trying to tinker a bit and see maybe he can get Cancelo back in. But I did do a drop with Diaz, as I say, and it gave me an 8 mil mid. But in the end, I kind of saw that if I had Cancelo, I'd have about 7 million, and that was with a 4.5 keeper. So I looked at like the likes of Grealish. I wasn't convinced. When I then had to go up to a better goalkeeper, like a kind of Mendy or Lloris or even Edison, I did then see I could only afford like a 6 mil mid, but I kind of thought, I don't mind Martinelli at 6 mil to start the season. Obviously, he could be rotated, but I really think he's gained Arteta's trust. And I thought, why not? Those fixtures are great. And I'd rather kind of have Cancelo and Martinelli than say Grealish and Laporte or Grealish and Diaz. Like it just feels so much stronger as a combo for me personally. The other thing is, I think Mariner said this. I know maybe I'm a bit more template than some players, but essentially, like we always say, FPL can't be won in game week 1, but it can be lost. And in the first 4 game weeks, if you're going to take a big punt that you don't think like Cancelo is going to haul like he did before, or Haaland isn't going to haul like we might think, you're betting against like half the field in this. So like Cancelo is like the second most owned defender now. He's 46% after Trent at 55. If you don't have Perisic either, you're in a scenario where like Cancelo is 46%, Perisic is 45%, James is 43%. If you only have one of those 4 in your team and they all perform well, over those first 4 weeks, you're going to be in the millions ranking. You're going to be playing massive catch up. So for me, like I like to kind of stick with the template in the first few weeks and maybe start to find like the bargains or the value or the interesting assets a few weeks in. Maybe even save a transfer in game week 2 and take a -4 for a mini wildcard in game week 3. I know Late Riser, he last season had a great season as well, and he changed his approach. So he came 30th in the world 2 years ago. Then he finished like 700k odd. And that season, what he did was he went against Salah in game week 1. He didn't own him. He didn't captain him. He kept making choices like that to chase upside. And what he took from that was that he wanted to start risk managing a bit differently. And he would still be maverick as he is. But his approach was something similar to maybe my own, which is we're both very template at the start now. Maybe we have 2 or 3 differentials in our team at the beginning out of the 11, but we only really start to get aggressive a bit later on once we have more info, because that's the other thing I was saying to you, Gabe, right? Like everything we know, all the research, all the preseason matches, all that data means nothing once game week 1 starts. And suddenly we're going to have a whole new bed of data to use with just 1 week sample size. So by the time you get to game week 4, you've got 4 week sample size and it starts to become a bit more consistent and you can start looking for patterns. And maybe that's when you say, oh, I don't think Cancelo's worth it. Champions League just started. I'll downgrade a bit to a different City defender, but I'll wildcard to a different team structure. But I just feel like in those first 4 weeks, you can truly fall behind. It's not meant to be a fear tactic, but if you're kind of going against some of the higher owned players, I would say if you back your conviction, great, go for it. But I would also ask yourself, do you back your conviction enough to accept that for every 20-point haul they might get, 50% of the field is gaining points on you? So it's like, that's the way I would look at it. Now, Diaz, I think he's like 9% owned. Laporte is 5%. I have had Chilwell in my draft this whole time. He's only like 12% owned. James is 43% owned. And I'm asking myself a similar question there. I'm like, they're the same price, same position fullback. Chilwell has like 9 points per game average or something, or per 90, compared to James's 6. He's coming back from a long-term injury. Do I back my conviction of Chilwell enough to be willing to let 43% of the field get James points on me? Like, Chilwell won't hurt me if I go for James, but the other way around could. So part of me is kind of thinking, if this season is prone to a quarterly view, where you're going to potentially wildcard in the first quarter, get unlimited transfers in the second quarter after the World Cup, and then get another bunch of wildcard changes 3 quarters in, do I just kind of attack the fact that these best teams with the best defenders have the best fixtures and the higher owned assets is probably wisdom of the crowd as opposed to FOMO? And that's, I think, what I'm trying to get at is that the conclusion is you need to decide, are these percentages rising because casuals are opening the game, they see James is 43%, so more of them buy him and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy? Or is there actually something in it that says, no, like Chilwell is as good or better than James? Why is the difference so big? I think that's a much more pointed question because they're the same price as opposed to Cancelo and Diaz and Laporte. That's just something I thought I'd put out there. Like, for me, I just don't want to be left behind the pack in the beginning. And last season, for instance, my lowest rank was game week 1. So it's like, if you can start off well, if the template bangs and you're not there with it, like, it's going to be a long way back. And if it flops, everyone flops with you. I know some people don't want to play in that way, but I see FPL like poker, and I'm playing the field. Doesn't matter what hand I have, if it beats everyone else, then fair play, squeeze in 1, 2, 3 funky differentials. But for me, at the cost of a player that can get 200 points across the season like Cancelo, that's not for me. But that was just a long rant about more than defenders, like just the general way I like to play FPL.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I think you have to fix your team and make transfers in defensive areas as attacking players are maybe starting to pop and gaining form, and you can't jump on them because you're busy fixing your defense. And I would say, like, in terms of risk, think of it as like almost like a finance, like a you don't invest a lot of money in the risk. So don't take your risk. Don't make your punt a maybe 10 million player. Maybe you don't start with. I mean, I'm not saying not to start with Sterling, but it's a punt. It's a big punt, and you're going to make a sacrifice on a premium, highly owned player. So then that'll be another thing that you have to fix as well. I have, for example, I think the 5.5 million that with the highest midfielder with the highest ownership is Neto, right? Neto hasn't been in any of my drafts. I'll go for Wissa. I'll go for there are other 5.5 million players that that we talked about today as well. That's where I'll be taking at least my early season punts.
Yeah, Neto's like 23% owned. Let's say Wissa's only like few percent owned. That's less of a gamble because 22% isn't the end of the world, and I don't rate like a Neto over Wissa as much as, like, say, Cancelo over Diaz.
Right.
Just the difference in the potential I see in my mind, and the 60% ownerships and things like that, like the damage that can be done, the value I believe those players have, they're very different. Whereas with a Chilwell and James, maybe I'll pussy out basically and go for James because of the ownership, because I'm like, well, I don't want to be left behind. And even though I back my conviction with Chilwell, I'll fix that wildcard later. So with Neto and Wissa, I think it's more accessible to make that kind of punt. In the midfield, just on that same point quickly, I know it's a defensive show, but Salah's obviously 59%. There's some no Mo drafts out there. Diaz is 32%, which is probably why we've not seen many Robertson drafts. Son is 26% still. Neto 22%. Bruno Guimaraes is 22%. Coutinho is 20%. Saka 17%. Andreas Pereira 16%. So in midfield, it doesn't feel as intense, the template. Son is up there at about quarter ownership. Diaz a third. But generally, it's okay. And then just finally, forwards is worth wrapping on as well. Haaland 65%. Jesus is 55%. Greenwood to enable them both is 28%. Kane 16%. Darwin 15%. So again, it just kind of feels like in the forward and backline areas, those templates are very entrenched. So I think perhaps you are right in looking for your differential points in the midfield personally, just based on what we're seeing in the early season so far. But let's keep going through. There's a few smaller bits. So defenders summary. Yes, I think I'll go back to the two heads. We'll take some live chat questions. There was a chat question from Twitter as well. So let me just find the question from Twitter. I had it somewhere. So the one Twitter question was from a Blue Danube guy, or Danube Joe on Twitter. Yeah, he says, who are going to be the whipping boys this coming Premier League season? For me, it will be the promoted teams, as well as Everton and Southampton. Does it make sense to target those fixtures, right? So all three promoted teams and then Everton and Southampton to target. So let's, I guess, quickly just pull up the defensive FDR for the first five for all the teams, right? So have a quick look at that in his theory. So Southampton's there at minus 9.4. Everton's there at minus 3.3. It's not so bad compared to them. And then the promoted teams, you got kind of minus 9.2 for Forest, minus 7.7 for Fulham, minus 10.1 for Bournemouth. So I think at least at the very start, until the fixtures turn, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that's another reason why I'm so keen on the likes of Cancelo and Haaland in my Game Week 1 team, because Haaland just feels like a lock in captaincy for me in Game Week 2. I know some are thinking about Kane to captain against Southampton in Game Week 1 instead of Salah against Fulham. And then they might move Kane to Haaland, but I don't want to be booking in a transfer like that. You don't know what other fires might come up. But yeah, the FDR kind of agrees with him, doesn't it? In terms of which teams to be targeting, at least for the first five defensively. I don't know if you want to add anything to teams to target outside of those, but otherwise I'll get some live chat questions if anyone has any questions, guys.
Yeah, throw the questions in there. I know we had a few. I've put stars on some of them.
Yeah, I've gone through and starred quite a few. Let's see. Some of them are from way back in the show. Some of these aren't even questions. Some of these are just fun things I thought I'd bring up. Like Fred gets a lot of flack. He's played out of position. I think Fred was one of United's better players last season. I agree. He might have a great season.
I I
Kevin
think
Rose as well.
next to a real central midfielder or defensive midfielder, I think Fred could actually do some really good things. I agree with Nihal there.
Well, he dinked the hell out of Allison yesterday, but we'll allow that. We'll allow that. They started their strongest team. Kevin Rose, FPL Sapper, we give you a shout out at the start of the show before you arrived, but nice to see a Hauler member here. Good to see Charles Kelly. Hammond asked about Ramsdale. I think in the power ranking tables, he was up there, but I'm more convinced by the likes of Tomiyasu. Personally, I agree with Nehal. Madison is great. I just think I can move to him later if needed. We talked about Saliba. We talked about Haaland from Armand's pronunciation lesson. Nehal makes another great point. So barring the top 4 teams, which we're kind of heavily going for in our back lines, it is very subjective for the mid-table teams. Like if some of the ones we've said have bad FDRs start off well and start off on fire, the conversation will change very quickly, which is I think what I was trying to get at. All of this is just assumptions until we see the first ball kick off. Our minds are going to change significantly after game week 1. So I would kind of just keep a flexible structure that you can move between players. FPL Escapades is team value more important than ever with the extra wildcard during the wildcard World Cup even. So I don't see why not. I think for me, like the beginning of the season is a great time to build team value. In case you missed it, Escapades, we did have a very small section on building team value at the end of the kind of team structures and fixture block episode last week. So I'll put a link to that in the chat for everyone. But go have a look. I think we were really proud of last week's episode. I think it was one of the best ones we've ever done. Like there was a lot of good feedback in the first hour, was really good content. So if you've not seen that episode, please do go check it out.
But it is an interesting point because we'll have, a wild card is like an opportunity to spend your money, the money that you've been accumulating. Oftentimes you don't want to sell a player because you've accumulated value in him, and having kind of an extra unlimited transfer session, it's like an extra shopping spree. So is having a little more coin more important since you get an extra shopping spree? I think it could be.
Yeah, no, it's an opportunity to make a wild card twice in the first 17 weeks, which we normally never get. So I would definitely adapt to the season with that in mind. Thoughts on Shelby? I think for me, like Bruno Guimaraes, especially that ownership, he's definitely someone worth considering alongside Martinelli at the 6 million price point. I think that's kind of who I would go for. I'm not sure how much Shelby costs, Tom, but do let me know if he's cheaper than 6 million. He may well be. He's more of I feel like he's a Hollywood passer to me, like Lord Voldemort himself, just with the crossfield diagonal long ball. But I'm not convinced from an FPL point of view. Tom also says
5 million.
5 million. At 5 million, I'd be more tempted with Bailly from Villa if he doesn't also break down with his many injuries. Bailey, Leon Bailey.
I think that's a great shout, actually, and I'm sure we'll get some midfielders next week, but Bailey could be really interesting on Villa's right side. I'm
excited to see how he does in the power rankings when we're not necessarily looking at minutes and nailedness. Tom's talking about Kane, Salah, Haaland. Is it worth it to have a lesser team? I think the only thing I would say here, so in the first episode, so 2 episodes before this one, we looked at team structures, and that's another great one to look at. We have 5 or 6 different team structures, including 1 premium, 2 premium, 3 premium, and there is an argument to have all 3. I think the main points we made then was that you're only ever going to captain 1. You probably only need a captaincy rotation of 2. You could probably map out your 6 weeks of captaincy with just 2. If you're not captaining them, they're not necessarily, in my opinion, worth the 12, 13 million price point if they're never going to be captained. So maybe not for me, but it depends on what you're doing with the team, because the teams I saw that looked like this, like they had like Walker instead of Cancelo, they had Matip instead of Trent, they had a 4.5 goalkeeper, they had a midfield of like say Salah, like a 6 mil and a 5.5, and then 2 4.5 mil mids and a 4.5 mil forward. So there was a few kind of situations where you think to yourself, my 10th and 11th player are both very cagey. Like I'm having to roll out like 2 4.5 defenders every week, or I'm going to roll out a 5.5 and a 6 mil midfielder every week, and you can't even rotate them. Like you have to play them every week. So maybe tweet us some drafts which include all 3. We can have a think. We'll do some rate my teams of the haulers drafts close to game week 1. Like last season it went down really well. We got a guest and people sent in like 30 different drafts, and we went through and gave them like ratings out of 10 and had a few drinks. And towards the end, a lot of people were getting 1 out of 10 as people got progressively drunker. But so it's Niels' question on Mahrez, Foden, Grealish. This is a tough one. Mahrez shows up every preseason in game week 1, and then Pep just proceeds to not play him for a while. It's just painful for me. I know we say Sterling and Jesus have left, but Alvarez has arrived. I could see Foden play right wing potentially with Grealish on the left and Haaland in the middle. There's still options, I think, for Mahrez to not be that guy. I think Foden is one of Pep's favorite players. If I was to pick between those two at 8 million, I'd personally go for Foden. I'd be reluctant on either, if I'm honest. I'd still pick Saka or Diaz as the standout at that price point. Yeah. Grealish at 7 million, he's interesting. If we believe in the idea that it takes 2 seasons to bed into Pep's system, I think he played him all 8 of the first games last season. Maybe now is the time where Grealish comes onto his own, but he did have 3 goals and 3 assists last season, and he didn't quite light up the world, but he was trusted quite a lot. So I think Grealish at 7 million, that's one of the reasons these 3 players you mentioned, Niels, they're why I don't want to go for Edison, because having Cancelo and Haaland in my team, I want to leave that 3rd spot, and I don't want that 1st City attacker in game week 1. I just want to monitor it, and their fixtures are great in the long term. So once we identify who might be the best 3rd attacker from City, I'll probably lump into them, but I don't want to make that call in game week 1 personally. I think regarding the bench that JLo talks about, so I think it is interesting. With the 5 subs, I imagine a lot of our starting 11 will get minutes and cameos, even if they don't start. I'll put my neck out on the line and say that I can't see anyone using their 2nd bench player before game week 8. Like I just don't see it. And definitely not before game week 5 when Europe hasn't started for the first 4 weeks. I just think our 11 are going to get minutes, even if it's a cameo. So that's why I'm not so concerned about like having like a 4.5 defender and Andreas Pereira and Greenwood on my bench. I just don't think I'm ever going to need to rely on them. So I'm happy enough with that. Okay, so Escapades did watch last week's episode. Thanks for that. Mayhow's already got Leon Bailey. We don't seem so keen on it. I will say, like, obviously, don't take what we're saying for gospel. Elron covered Gabriel, and if you look at the lessons learned episode, we did tell him that his Spurs bias tanked his season a bit. He did still finish top 1%, but he's going to work on his Spurs bias because 2 seasons in a row has really slapped him in the face, hasn't it?
Yep.
And I have Spurs bias. I'm an Arsenal fan, so obviously don't take my word for it. But I just think Doherty at 5 million, if I know he's going to be starting right back, I really like the look of him. I did say, to be fair, that if you're going to go for Perisic at that ownership, it is a threat to not have him. And that's why I'm tempted by Lloris, because I need some kind of cover. I don't know if I can go in without Perisic or Lloris. But equally, I'm more of a kind of cheap backline kind of guy. So I have my 3 premium defenders in Chilwell or James, Trent and Cancelo. But then I have 2 4.5s. So I just don't want to like spend an extra million on that 4.5 being upgraded to Perisic when I'm perfectly happy rotating the 2 4.5s for that 4th defender spot. And like that extra million, it's going to get me like a Lloris instead of a Raya. It's going to, like, for me, it's kind of like, I think Lloris over Raya is more beneficial for me than, like, say, Perisic, who might, once the Champions League starts in game week 5 onwards, be more likely to not play full 60s or sub on. I just don't see enough upside there. So I'm happy enough with the 4.5 defenders. But don't not go for them because of us. I'd say the other thing is, like, obviously, you know your own play style and how you like to play FPL. And I would stick to your own strategies. I'm just very much a back 3 kind of guy, despite big at the back being popular. So it's just not for me. But yeah, I think Perisic could be great. He could haul his ass off silly, but it's just really not for me. Okay. I'll submit another one. Cool. Okay. Thank you, FPL Penguin. Hopefully we'll come back on your show soon or have you on as well. Looking for some guests this season for sure. I think Grealish is 7 mil, by the way, not 7.5, unless I'm mistaken. But at that kind of concept, I don't know if Bernardo will still be there. Gundo at 7, Bernardo at 7, they're not for me. Oh yeah, no, so Gundo's at 7.5. Yeah, so you could ditch Edison on the first wildcard. So you could just go for him and then ditch him on an early wildcard, get that other City attacker once you know who's the right one. 2 more final questions I'm going to take before we get out of here. So Penguin says, best 8 million mid to go for: Mahrez, Kulusevski or Maddison. he has Salah and Jesus, and therefore he doesn't want Diaz and Saka to double up. What do you thoughts on Mahrez, Kulusevski, or Maddison, knowing that obviously he doesn't want the other two that we've said are prime targets for us?
I mean, I think of those three, Salah, Jesus, I'm assuming he doesn't have Holland. If he doesn't have Holland, Mahrez is too risky. I think you go with the safe option in Kulusevski. I think that's probably who I would favor. I just overcame some Spurs bias there. I almost said Mahrez, but I'll say Kulusevski.
No, I'm proud of you. I think I would probably still say Maddison, but I'm not overcoming my Spurs bias there. That's probably why. Emerson, Royale, Doherty rotation. They're definitely not for me. I just don't think you can rotate players that are going to sub on after 60 minutes to get a cameo anyway. You're just going to get screwed up anyway. And you're going to basically have a bench player that just you're never going to get off the bench because the one who they're supposed to be rotating with will cameo at some point.
No, I think he's wondering if Conte will rotate.
Oh, I see. I thought he wanted both of them. I thought, okay.
No, so and I think he brings up a good point. Emerson and Doherty. I mean, Conte rotates his wingbacks. He's gonna rotate probably Sessegnon and Perisic on the left, and Emerson Royale and Doherty on the right.
I see. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And again, this just adds to me the reason why I'm a bit nervous on the Spurs fullbacks, but I do like their defensive FDR. So Lloris is hotting up for me in my head. J-Lo just says it was about not wanting to make a transfer game one. Yeah, so that makes sense. Yeah, like ideally you wouldn't make a transfer after the first game week so you can save up. But for me, like I guess because my bench is like literally Tomiyasu and Dunk rotating, I guess there is a bench player if someone got injured and I could just play them. But I'd be careful because normally like the inactive players start disappearing at each international break if they've had a bad game week especially. So those 0.3 million rises and drops, they are going to happen in the first few weeks. So if you get an injured player who's 50% owned, yes, you could use your bench, but yes, he could also drop 0.3 and his replacement could go up 0.3 by the time you've saved that transfer to use your bench. So I agree, ideally you wouldn't want to use it, but if it's looking like 700,000 people are transferring someone out and he's out long term, like I would rather just get rid there and not suck up the drops, because I think we said on the last few shows, a 0.1 drop in the first few weeks, that's actually a 0.5 drop. Because if you've got like an 8 mil player and they drop to 7.9, you can no longer get to any of the 8 million midfielders in that same price point. You're now stuck at the 7.5 price point. So it's a big drop in reality. I think I prefer Foden over Mahrez. If you said Foden, Kulusevski, or Maddison, I may have picked Foden there instead of Maddison.
I would have picked Foden as well.
So FPL A+, Vardy punt for the front three spot. So I think the problem is, like, I think it's fine, but it's just like who you're getting instead. So like if you've got like a Jesus and Vardy, like can you get to Haaland or Kane if they explode? You have to take a hit or like rip money out elsewhere if you want big at the back. If you've got Haaland and Vardy, you're spending a lot more on your front line than everyone with Haaland and Jesus. So again, I think it can work, but where is your sacrifice? Because like these kind of teams, they all sound great, but there's bound to be a sacrifice somewhere. FPL Pharmacist, another regular of the show, Trent plus 4.5 million defenders, and then one of the extra premium attackers. So I guess you could look at this as like Trent plus Cancelo or Trent plus Chilwell or James, and then 4.5. So I think the difficulty there is like, although we found lots of rotations for defenders across like two teams, you're going to be rotating in 2 out of 3 probably, because I doubt you're playing a back 3 with 4.5s. Like you're probably going to be playing 2 of them every week. So it's tough because like I don't know how many teams have a 3-way rotation where 2 of the teams have a good fixture, 1 has a bad one. You can do that easily with 4.5s. Like maybe you could sneak in like a West Ham to that Newcastle Spurs trio, and maybe the Newcastle Arsenal trio as well. There's a few options, but depends what you're getting. Like if that funds like a triple premium, then maybe I'd be tempted. But if you've still only got 3 premiums despite that.
Both approaches make sense. It just depends what you're doing with the extra money and how you're investing it. So from my perspective, I'll probably go with Trent, Cancelo, 2 4.5s, and maybe a 4.0. I do want a stake in the 4.0 starting defender, be it Patterson or Nico Williams or whomever.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. If I was going to go down the route he's just mentioned, I would still rather just have two 4.5s and just have a 4 million bench and squeeze out the half mil elsewhere, because I think at the start of the season is a good time to milk out your money in the starting 11, not on the bench.
What do you think
Nils
of
has
premiums and two 4.0s?
Because you can only play free, you have to play free defenders, and if for some reason one of them does not cameo on, that would scare me a bit. But there are 4.0s. You'd think one of Patterson or Neco Williams will sub on. Hopefully, you would think
or
so.
you
If
have
Coleman's
a
out,
sub from a different, in a different position for, like, maybe of them Andres Pereira then.
but it's what I mean. So they can't sub on, because if you don't, you have to play free
it
defenders.
has to be the defender. That's right.
Yeah, so that's why it worries me a little bit too much. For the sake of 0.5, that just feels like you might have a 10-player game week. It kind of scares me. Harry Wilson's here at 6 million at Fulham. He's 1% owned, could be a cheeky differential. That's the exact spot that I think differentials can be good. The fixtures, I guess Liverpool home first isn't great. If you can rotate him with someone like a 4.5 defender that has a better first fixture and then play him in the better games, sure. But Fulham have a horrendous first 7 weeks. That their best fixtures are Brentford home, Brighton home, which aren't exactly great. They face Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea. It's just not for me. Like, when you got Martinelli and Bruno Guimaraes at that price point, when you've got Fornals, Neto Wisser at those price points, like, obviously fair play to you. Like, I don't want you to just, anyone who asks to rate my team, right? This is the problem with Twitter and stuff. Is like, everyone's always going to say the players that you have that they have are great, and the players that you have that they don't, you should change to the players they have. So take what I say with a pinch of salt. Like, there's going to be bias. I'm going to obviously like justify picking the players I have rather than the ones you have, but go with your gut. Like, these are the positions to have fun in. This is literally one of the 2 or 3 positions in my 11 that would be the fun punt at a lower ownership. So don't be like pressed to copy the Twitter template. Equally, I would say what we see on the Twitter template isn't like necessarily reflective of the masses playing the game.
And I think also Harry Wilson, I mean, he was so important for them in the championship last season. I want to see how they adapt to the Premier League, especially in those difficult matchups, but also a prime candidate for a wild card, game week 8, game week 9, and then they go on a nice run of fixtures after their tough start. So easy to wait and see with Harry Wilson.
Great. I think I'll get us out of here. There's a few good comments in the chat. They don't seem like they have question marks in them. So seeing as we're 2 hours, 2 minutes in, I'll let you guys see yourselves out on that one. But if you found the show helpful, please do kind of hit like. If you've been here with us for the whole 2 hours, we've had a great time with you, very lively in the chat. If you are on kind of Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we would really appreciate a review on there. It really helps us get found by new people who aren't on YouTube or aren't on Twitter, and some new audiences. Thank you to our 15 members and our super haulers as well. Do kind of get in touch in the next week or so as Marina's back from holiday. I'll start to send out the invites to the Discord community for the members, and we'll start to get the ball rolling. And once we've got it in place, I think we may extend a few channels for free to everyone who watches and keep some of the kind of other channels for the members on YouTube. But for now, we were Net That Haul. This was obviously the goalkeeper and defenders show and some more matchups from Gabriel. Next week, we'll be back with Mariner. Probably, I think we're looking at maybe next Thursday, a late one at 11 p.m. UK, because obviously that would be Singapore morning on Friday for him. We're going to look at midfielders. We're going to go through the FDRs again, power tables, value, form, everything. So there'll be a few more matchups as well. The teams are going to be getting very exciting, and the tactics of those teams are going to be very fun. But honestly, guys, it's been a pleasure. We love having you guys here interacting with us. It's a true privilege to be able to chat with our friends live and just talk about the game we all love and just meet so many fellow enthusiasts. And you guys are, honestly, your support means so much that you're just here every week chatting away, and we couldn't do it without you. Honestly, you keep us motivated. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the preseason shows, and other than that, big love to everyone, and see you next week.